When people think about gladiators, they usually imagine strong warriors walking into the arena with swords in their hands, armor shining, and thousands of Romans chanting their names. It sounds powerful. It sounds heroic. It almost feels like ancient Rome had its own version of sports stars. But the real life of a gladiator was much darker than that. Behind the cheers, the music, the flags, and the giant arenas, there was a brutal system built on fear, control, and violence. Gladiators were not just entertainers. Many of them were slaves, prisoners of war, criminals, or desperate men with almost no other choice. Some did volunteer, but even then, it was usually because poverty, debt, or hunger had pushed them into a corner. The arena offered a tiny chance at money, fame, or freedom. But the price was simple. Your body belonged to Rome. A gladiator could become famous and still not be free. That is the strange cruelty of this world. A man could hear the crowd scream his name, see women admire him, watch fans celebrate him, and still return to a locked training school at night. Fame did not mean safety. Popularity did not mean control over his own life. He was admired, but he was also owned. Gladiators trained in schools called ludi. From the outside, these places might sound like elite warrior academies, but in reality, they were closer to prisons with training yards. The men lived under strict rules. They trained for hours, practiced with different weapons, learned how to move, strike, defend, and survive. Their trainers were often former gladiators who understood exactly what the arena demanded. They were not teaching honor. They were teaching survival. Every move mattered. One slow reaction could mean a blade in the stomach. One bad step could mean falling in front of thousands of people who did not care about your fear. The training was harsh because the arena was harsher. If a fighter disobeyed, he could be beaten, chained, starved, or punished in ways meant to break his will. The goal was not just to make him strong. The goal was to make him useful. Even their food had a dark purpose. Gladiators were often fed heavy grain-based meals, especially barley, which is why some Romans called them barley men. That sounds almost funny at first, but the reason behind it was disturbing. A thicker layer of body fat could protect them from deeper wounds. It could make cuts bleed dramatically without killing them too quickly. That was the twisted logic of Roman entertainment. Gladiators were not only trained to fight, they were trained to bleed in a way that pleased the crowd. The arena itself was not just a battlefield, it was theater. Every fight was designed for drama. Different types of gladiators had different weapons and armor. One might carry a large shield and sword, another might fight with a net and trident. Some were heavily armored. Others were faster and more exposed. Rome loved contrast. Strength against speed, steel against strategy. A trapped man against a charging fighter. For the people watching, it was exciting. For the gladiator, it was a nightmare with rules. The crowd did not sit quietly. They shouted, laughed, cheered, insulted, and judged. They wanted courage. They wanted pain. They wanted a show. A gladiator could not simply survive. He had to survive in a way that looked brave. If he acted scared, the crowd could turn against him. If he fought well, even in defeat, he might earn mercy. That is what made the arena so cruel. A man could be badly wounded, exhausted, and terrified, but still had to perform strength for people who saw his suffering as entertainment. Not every gladiator fight ended in death, despite what movies often show. Trained gladiators were expensive, and owners did not want to lose them too quickly. Many fights ended with surrender or mercy. But death was always nearby. A wound could become infected. A cruel sponsor could demand blood. A mistake could end everything in seconds. And for condemned criminals, the arena was often not a sport at all. It was a public execution dressed up as entertainment. One of the most frightening moments came after a gladiator lost. If he was wounded and could no longer fight, he might raise a finger to ask for mercy. Then came the noise of the crowd. Some shouted for his life. Others wanted death. The final decision belonged to the person sponsoring the games, or sometimes the emperor himself. Imagine lying in the sand, bleeding, while thousands of strangers decide whether you deserve another sunrise. That was not just a fight. That was public judgment. And yet, some gladiators became true celebrities. Their names were scratched onto walls. People talked about their victories. Women admired them. Children may have pretended to fight like them. A successful gladiator could become more famous than many ordinary free men ever would. But this fame had a cruel side. The crowd loved him because he risked death for them. His danger was the attraction. His pain was the product. Rome had a talent for making violence feel normal. It wrapped bloodshed in ceremony, music, and celebration. The arena turned death into a public event. People came with excitement, not horror. They watched men suffer and called it entertainment. That may be the darkest part of all. The cruelty was not hidden. It was celebrated in broad daylight. For some gladiators, freedom was possible. If a fighter survived long enough, won enough respect, and pleased the crowd, he could be awarded a wooden sword called a ludus. This meant he was released from fighting. For many gladiators, that was the dream. Stay alive, win respect, earn freedom, walk away before the arena finally takes everything. But even freedom did not erase what had happened. A former gladiator carried scars on his body and memories in his mind. He had seen men die inches away from him. He had listened to crowds cheer while blood soaked the sand. Some former gladiators became trainers. Others stayed connected to the games because that was the only world they knew. Freedom was better than the arena, but it was not a clean, happy ending. It was survival after years of being turned into a weapon. The games also had a political purpose. Roman leaders used them to gain popularity. Wealthy men sponsored games to show off their power. Emperors used massive spectacles to remind people that Rome was rich, strong, and in control. The crowd received entertainment. The politicians received loyalty. The gladiators paid the real price. That is why gladiator life tells us so much about ancient Rome. The Romans admired courage, discipline, and strength. But they also built a society where human suffering could become a festival. The arena was not just a place where men fought. It was a symbol of Roman power. It showed that Rome could conquer people, own them, train them, display them, and decide whether they lived or died. The most disturbing truth is that gladiators were often treated as both heroes and property at the same time. The crowd could admire their bravery, but still accept their suffering. A man could be loved by thousands and still have no real control over his future. He could become a legend, but only because the system first took away his freedom. So the next time gladiators are shown as fearless warriors chasing glory, remember what was really behind the image. There was fear behind the helmet. There was pain beneath the armor. There was a human being standing in the sand trying to survive while an empire watched for pleasure. Gladiator life was not just about swords, strength, and fame. It was about men trapped inside a machine that turned violence into entertainment. Some became famous. Some earned freedom. Many died forgotten. And all of them lived under the same terrible truth. In ancient Rome, a gladiator's blood could make the crowd roar, but his life was never fully his own. Gladiators were not just warriors of glory, they were trapped men fighting for survival while Rome cheered for blood. If you enjoyed this dark side of history, like and subscribe for more powerful stories.